I'm Candice Ford, and I will be discussing Mary Wollstonecraft's views on women's equality in education. Mary was born in Spitalfields, London in 1759 and passed away in 1797, shortly after the birth of her second daughter. Mary's home life and the French Revolution greatly impacted her views. We will briefly discuss her philosophy and a reflection of her views in current times. Her home life was far from ideal. However, these events opened her eyes to the unjust political system, especially regarding women. She was a victim of domestic violence. Her father, wanting to be a gentleman, lacked funds and work ethic, resorting to liquor and the vulnerability of his wife. Mary at times would throw herself in front of her mother or sleep in front of her parents' door. The laws of the time permitted husbands to beat their wives with a stick no thicker than a thumb, and recognized women, their money, and their children as the property of the husband. Mary was not her parents' favorite. Their favorite was Ned, the eldest son, who had the sole right to the family's property, otherwise known as the law of primogeniture. Mary rebelled against a family that gave sons preference over daughters and a society that gave men control over women. Mary's lack of parental affection would later emerge in her philosophy of education. Because Mary broke tradition, she conformed with liberal ideas. The liberals of the French Revolution fought for the rights of men. However, they did not consider these rights to cross over to women. Wollstonecraft believed the term should be generalized. Naturally, there were those who wanted tradition to prevail, known as conservatives. Edmund Burke was a conservative who wrote Reflections on the Rights of Man, attacking liberalist views and the revolution in France. Wollstonecraft rebutted with her work of Vindication of the Rights of Man, expressing her views against the power of rank, aristocracy, privilege, wealth, and limiting freedom. These events gave her inspiration for her renowned work of Vindication of the Rights of Women. She wrote in regards to Talleyrand's rejection of the inclusion of women in France's national education. In this work, she argued Rousseau's Emile, targeting his character Sophia and his views on women, and presented her idea for national education. Wollstonecraft believed women needed to be educated in order to gain independence from the male-dominant society. She thought the miseducation of artifice and domesticity further hindered women's knowledge and freedom. In her philosophy of education, she agreed with many of the naturalist philosophers of her time, including Locke, some aspects of Rousseau, and Pestalozzi. Much of her philosophy focused on sense and sensibility, sense being known as reason, and sensibility as a person's introspective ability to apprehend the world. She believed, like Rousseau, that teachers should resemble a loving, nurturing mother, and that learning was to be done through sensory experience with the environment. Rousseau was one philosopher that greatly impacted Wollstonecraft. She would often look to his work and agreed with his philosophy on natural education. However, she disagreed with Rousseau's objection to early reading and strongly detested his views on women. In Rousseau's Emile, his character Sophia reflected a woman created to please man. Women's education was to be pleasing, charming, sympathetic, helpful, and consoling to benefit their husbands. Wollstonecraft argued that women and men had equal intellectual abilities. She believed that a truly liberating education for both women and men would lead to independence rather than subordination. Wollstonecraft developed a national education that gave girls and boys equal opportunities. Mary saw the importance of children spending their days at school and their nights at home with their families, thus forming the idea of day schools. Her school would be co-ed, viewing man and woman both cognitively and psychologically the same. In order to open their faculties, they should be excited to think for themselves, and this can only be done by mixing a number of children together and making them jointly pursue the same objects. She was against recitation and memorization, leaning towards a naturalist education. Her national education started with children from 5 to 9 years of age. The school would be free and open to rich or poor. All children would dress alike and receive the same discipline. Following naturalist views, Mary stated that the schoolroom should be located near a large plot of land where children could play, exercise, and engage in gymnastics. She advised against children sitting for long periods of time, no more than an hour. The curriculum focused on reading, writing, arithmetic, natural history, and some simple experiments in natural philosophy. Religion, history, history of man, politics could be taught through conversations in Socratic form. After the age of 9, mornings would remain co-ed, however, afternoons children would go to schools for their intended employment. Girls could then attend a school to learn domesticities. Lower achieving and lower socioeconomic status children would attend vocational schools, and those of superior intellect or fortune attended an academic school. Title IX is one reflection of Wollstonecraft in current times. Title IX is a law passed in 1972 that requires gender equity for boys and girls in every educational program that receives federal funding. Many times it is overlooked and taken for granted. I know it was presented to us in a course format for SAU. This law works to provide equality amongst genders in 10 separate areas, including higher education, career education, education for pregnant and parenting students, employment, learning environment, math and science, sexual harassment, standardized testing, and technology. We see similar views of Wollstonecraft around the world. Malala is a courageous young woman who is still advocating for women's rights and education. She was shot in the face by Taliban to stop her movement. Malala said, "Terrorists thought that they would change my aims and stop my ambitions, but nothing changed in my life except this. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born." Wollstonecraft mentioned in her Vindications of the Rights of Woman that tyrants of every denomination are all eager to crush reason. I encourage you to follow the link and learn more about Malala and what she has done and is continuing to do for women's rights and education in her country. Thank you for watching. These are the references that I used for the PowerPoint and the paper.